Beep, beep, boop, beep, boop, beep. Actraiser Renaissance is a remaster of the original early 90s Actraiser that came out on the Super NES and other generation consoles of that time. It combines action platforming with city building and simulation. In the action platforming sequences, you play as God that possesses the statue, and in the city building portion, you play as an angel that can shoot arrows at monsters that spawn around while you manage each region. There's 6 of them in total in the base game, and then they added an additional one after that. That I won't spoil beyond there being one. So a lot has changed from like the 90s itself, but 20 plus years later that they could improve upon a bunch of aspects. So they decided to focus more on the city simulation part rather than the action platforming. There's likely a cult following around this, I'm not aware. I played the original, though, on the Super NES at a friend's house when I was a kid, and then many years later, a like eShop version of it, I think it was, on the Wii. And even having played it then, though, and it being, I guess, dated, it still was a lot of fun, and I played through the entirety of the game. So I was excited to hear about this one coming out with like updated graphics and then some additions too. Even though there is a remaster, they did add a decent amount to the city building portion of the game. I played through the entirety of the base campaign and the extra region on normal mode, so it's not terribly difficult. I never was able to beat the last boss on the original game when I played that, but there is a hard mode too if you want the kind of the original difficulty. Starting though each game, you pick your name and you have this divine god-like theme, so you're kind of picking that. And the here's the difficulty that you have. It's pretty easy though, on especially easy, but even on normal, it's not that difficult. You might die a couple times in the action sequences and very rarely in the city building portion. So I recommend playing it on hard difficulty, but you're still getting a decent amount of content even if you're playing on normal, because you're looking at a couple hours or more for each region of the game. But with hard, you got to really, like with games like this, you got to dig into it a little bit more, even though it's not an overtly complex game. A lot of dialogue, and you see graphically how much better it looks. They use this anime type of style with the game, well, with the characters, but the background too, though, looks quite a bit better, especially with the cutscenes. That's one of the biggest difference here. Looking at the overworld, modern effects like with the clouds and the coloring, there is some pre-rendering going on when you get to the action fighting scenes, but it does, overall, even with that, some looks a little odd. I think it still looks better than the original game, unless like nostalgically you like the pixel graphics. There's an extra action sequence though. You saw those 3 parts there. The first is when you're fighting to liberate the world, where you play as God. But the third one, you're also defeating the boss at the end too. This is the part that is largely the same as the original, except graphically it looks quite a bit better, even though it's using pre-rendered graphics. You still have the same kind of attacks. You have your attack, you can go up attack, down attack. You have a back roll you can do, and then an attack where you're just attacking forward. If you mash the button, he attacks like a little bit faster there. So not a lot to wrap your mind around. It's more about the limitations of how your character move, and you have things like I'm on this tree branch here. I can't press down an A even to go to the bottom part. So they took a more purist approach. I don't know if they did it deliberately or out of laziness with the action, the side-scrolling sequences here. But it's still like a decent amount of fun because it is basic and it doesn't take up a huge chunk of the game. Then if you play the original, you're gonna really enjoy the new graphics, like with the character you're looking at, the enemies, but the backgrounds especially. Like even here too, there's that depth perception, and there's a lot more color. Looks quite a bit better. But the enemies themselves, it's very simplistic. They have their attack pattern. They mainly just walk around left to right, and there's other funny elements that you had in games this time. You kind of forget where like you're on a log with a string going from one. It was really to serve the gameplay. They didn't care if it really fit the character of the game. That another one, the classic one is though you're on a string with a log and a bird is carrying it. I think even a bird poops on you somewhere in one of these regions. So like this aspect though, if you're playing on normal or easy, it's not terribly difficult if you want to just kind of get through it. When you get to hard, then you're going to have to repeat some sections of it and really get better at. You got the get good element to understand all the controls and to understand like the up down attack, bottom A attack is gives you a short amount of invincibility, or when you do the roll, kind of going back behind the boss. There's another log with a string to get there. To increase your attack, it's not just you're going through left to right. You want to collect as much of these like magic points as possible. This increases your character's attack damage, and you'll notice in the back, right now he's glowing blue, but you eventually get to be glowing yellow, and you get plus 100% attack. And you're gonna especially be using this if you're playing on hard difficulty. But on the easier ones, normal is basically easy with this game too. You don't really have to mess with it. You get as much as you want as you can, and then you just kind of roll through it. I didn't die that many times on normal, and I'm like not really trying all that hard either. It's like kind of casually going through it. There are a couple semi-difficult sequences that you'll have, but the point really is not the action sequences of the game. You have that improvement with the city building. Here, the last save point you have that ups your health to make sure it's easy enough. The first boss, though, I started on hard. The boss wasn't difficult, even on hard mode. They all have a predictable, a lot of them have a predictable pattern, especially early on. Like this one, you just jump behind. This is the Centaurus, and mash away, try and get as much health down as you can, and then you kind of walk back and forth, try to get around him. Sometimes he changes up his pattern where he'll gallop back towards you, catch you off guard, but that's about it. And then you're just jumping over, doing the same thing again. So if you like that old school gameplay, you played the original, that is completely intact here with Actraiser Renaissance. The music for the side-scrolling parts and the city-building parts is really very well done. It is a lot of them from the original. I think they changed around one of the tracks from the Japanese version where they had a different music track, and of course some people were complaining about that. But I believe like that is one of the differences that you have with this game is they're following a remaster of the Japanese version, and that's like kind of the only difference from the North American version. Here, after beating the boss though, you go to the city. Again, looks a heck of a lot better compared to the pixel graphics with like the sunlight and just the vibrance in the color. You don't expect it to, seeing some images of the game when you're seeing the side-scrolling parts, but and then you have the anime character style with the angel, and then also with the citizens too. They have a different set also of citizens and how they look. It's just still shots, and then they have like the reaction shot. But there is a different group with every region that you're going into. And the other theme that one new addition is the hero unit, and you predictably always know who it is because there's only three characters. You have the male and the female of the region, and then you have this mysterious third character that's obviously somebody you're going to be using later. And you use the character in the sieges or the raids that you have for each of the regions. Early on, it's a bit boring because it's too straightforward. You're not really doing a whole lot. But as you get farther into the game, I noticed by like the desert world, it got better. But with the city building part, you're just telling them where to go initially, and then they will build a road. This is much improved. I remember this part from the original game that it would sometimes take too long, or I had to kind of do it again, but now it's immediate. They will kind of build that road up. You can kind of see what's going on right away, and then you can leave it. They'll build their own buildings, and it'll be randomized. Even if you want like a farm or a workshop, they'll build one or the other, and houses along with that too. And a bit slow starting out though. You're not doing a whole lot. You're doing those handful of roads, and then there is a ton of text in this game, more so than the original. You're spending 2+ hours just in the first region alone, and on top of that there's a bunch of tutorials telling you how to do this and how to do that, so it just feels like you're clicking and clicking and not doing a whole lot with that first region. And then it kind of clears up in the second one. You get to sometimes use that second hero for the sieges, but really I was surprised by the third, the desert region. Then it is quite a bit more fun, and you're more involved in the story, having heard like the theological themes from the first two regions going into the third one. But you're going to be reading a lot of text, and you want to, if you're interested in Actraiser, because that's where they have really pushed for the improvements, is the dialogue and the amount of text and the amount of time that you're spending with the sieges, with the raids, the extra missions that you do for each of the monster layers that you got to defeat. That's another addition too. This is going to be the deciding factor if you have or have not played, especially if you haven't played the original, if this is something you're going to be interested in. Because right now it's at $30, so not cheap enough, but you're getting enough time. Along with that, though, you got to be interested in this aspect. Here I have the miracles. That's the same as the original game. I used lightning. You have different type of miracles you'll use, like lightning clears up shrubs and kind of rocks along with it. You'll have rain if something's on fire, or sunshine to evaporate like swampy land, that kind of stuff. You're using for the city management, and then in the sieges you'll use them too. Like with some enemies, like if one's on fire, I'll use water or wind if they're like flying in the air. Like not terribly complicated or cryptic stuff, like pretty basic. You can now zoom in. I'm zooming in and zooming out. This helps too. It's you connect more. It doesn't seem like it because the graphics aren't like cutting edge, but with the sieges I would often like zoom in and just kind of see where my hero was, and then they would like battle in a certain section of the map. I mean, kind of fun, even if I'm not directly controlling the character. It still is kind of fun just seeing them fight like whatever mobs are going on, and then just seeing what random stuff that the villagers end up building. And you have that natural progression. It is very linear. Like there isn't the like as much customization apart from the forts, which you'll see in a little bit. Like you're going to build every square possible space in the land, and it doesn't matter if they build farms or workshops, because like those are randomized. You're going to have enough of either. But seeing how it gradually changes while the story is going on, and since it is a larger chunk of time with all this dialogue, like you have more of a connection, at least I did, compared to the original, where it was more about, oh cool, like this changed, I built up this land, and then I beat this boss, time for the next one. Like it's that, like that was much more brief and a little more balanced, like in the original version where you had the action and then you had the city building. Here they doubled down on the city building aspect, and then the action is like almost exactly the same as before. One difference though is you have monster layers that you now have to destroy yourself. And these were put into the action sequences. It's kind of like a reminder of, remember this aspect of the game. But one thing that does help the action sequences that you're not seeing here, because you get magic for your god statue character later, is the magic effects and the different type of magic that you have. Like graphically, this looks pretty cool, and kind of livens it up, makes it more of like a spectating experience almost, like just trying the different types. But these are very easy. You just destroy these nodes that pop around, and you can see where the big main node is hiding behind this kind of web of gray blackness. So you do that. They do get more difficult, though, farther into the game. Just not as much as the main boss fights. It's basically functions as a diversion from, okay, let's take a break from city building and do one of these monster layers, and then creatively they can kind of stick things around. Like later on, the big monster node floats around. So you gotta kind of maneuver and even kind of build up your magic points. They stick with the same censorship, mild censorship with the Western version, where they don't say like God or Christian. They just, like, the most they say is Lord. But that was the theme of the original game. I think in the Japanese version they just said God, I believe. But I was surprised about the like how involved I was with the theological themes of each region. Like, they did a good job having a character that kind of brings up this idea, and it explores like different theological themes that it helps engross you with, and that revolves around the character that you take with you later, like the random third character that's obviously one of your god characters. That they have their own thing going on, and then the response to that is kind of the angel. Whereas you playing God are just kind of sitting back and then just kind of hearing these reports. Here's that third character, though, in Fillmore, Philotas, a decent variety. Like, he's melee, and you'll see in combat, once his like magic bar goes up, they do a special attack, and they have different functions, and they help your base in different ways, I believe. This guy does higher attack damage of your forts that you'll be building later. And then on melee, he can attack units on the ground, like with a decent amount of damage. But if you have units flying, then you want to use different characters. And it gets to be more fun later in the game when you're getting to the last couple, even the last 3 regions. You have some characters to choose from, and then you decide where they spawn in, kind of where you place them. It's just a bit slower early on because you have just one character, and then you plop them down somewhere, and then you have less magic and things to work with too, like an easier, smaller base also. Now they're starting to build a couple of those farms, and in a little bit it will be some workshops. In the first world, though, I'm just clearing up brush with lightning. That's the first one I get, and then a bit later I'm using some rain too. But it is, I keep forgetting, it is just the roads that you are building. And then the buildings that you'll build, there's a tech level thing as well. Like, as your civilization goes up in tech level, you want to actually destroy or smite the old buildings that you have, and then they'll build better housing to like increase their population, or you'll get like more resources, that kind of thing. And then you get up to the next tech level, or your population is high enough and they can attack the next monster base. This kind of frees up space. You build another road, they build more buildings there. It's that kind of a cycle that you have. But in between those, you're not just constantly building roads. You have to wait for your magic bar. You see my angel character up there. It's not full. I got 15 right now. The bigger the bubble that I place down, like with my lightning, like here you see I don't have enough, then I can take out more at a time. But you can do like small chunks, because it takes time for them to build all the buildings up. But like the faster you do it, the sooner you do it, the sooner you're going to have like more advanced buildings, more people, and then you get to the next thing and the next thing. But there is that casual element that does serve well, because then you're kind of sitting around, you get a little more text, you get to read that, and then kind of exploring, looking around. I gotta wait for my magic bar to go up. I knock out more shrubs, or I do something else. But now here, getting to the topic of the gatehouses and the block houses and the mage houses. These are your 3 defensive buildings, and all of this is explained in the beginning. After you get through that first region, that's the majority of the stuff you're going to be doing in the rest of the game. The gatehouses just act as walls. The block houses fire arrows, and then the mage houses fire area of effect magic bolts. That it's a slower rate of fire, but it does more like splash damage, quite a bit more damage. In the first part, though, you're just building a gatehouse. You're not messing with those two. I found playing throughout the game, this is where you have the most freedom to do what you want. Like, you lose if they take out your temple or some other objectives like taking out all your fields, but most of the time you're focusing on the temple. That's your most vulnerable point. So I found myself building like block houses, mage houses around the temple. This worked pretty well. I think I had one region where I had to spread them out a little bit, and then sometimes it would be destroyed, but not too often. So again, I would play this on hard mode to really use everything, because I got away with block houses, pretty much just block houses, and then just a couple mage houses here and there. Whereas you want to be using everything, like that's the whole purpose of it, and then even making some changes. Maybe you need more workshops or something like that could even factor in if you're playing on hard difficulty. But now looking at the raids, you have a settlement raid and then you have a siege. The siege is the quest event in the game that you have a lot of monsters fighting you. The raids are just, if you're playing for a certain amount of time, you'll see the hourglass will turn over with like this purple dust, and then just a handful of enemies will be fighting you. Here's one of the other sequences. I have a farm on fire, so I have to extinguish it with my rain powers. Not very, in-depth stuff compared to like RPGs or other city building things. You really are just placing down your roads, and then later on you're knocking out some buildings so you can raise up your population level. And then the combat is just your angel flying around knocking out monsters. There's not much in terms of that. It really is just the sieges, and that is only if you're playing on hard difficulty that you're going to really mess with making some choices of placing a building here, placing a building there, that sort of thing. I played it with a controller. A mouse would be fine, but since there aren't all that many commands, I'd recommend just playing it with a controller like the original. That was fine, and it actually was quite a bit faster because you're moving your angel around. It's easy to have a control stick. Aiming was a bit of an issue when I controlled the angel. I would, if I try to aim in a different direction from where he was going, I'd have to hold it down and fire at the same time. But since it is so basic, a controller is more than enough. And again, going back to a little bit more laid back, though, even if you're playing on hard difficulty. Here I upgrade Philotas. This was an odd choice. They should just upgrade automatically, but they ask you to upgrade them before. So finally, here's the first settlement siege that I have. Here you are still looking in the same viewpoint, the difference being you're controlling your hero unit or units, and still your angel, but you can't fire arrows. Instead, all you can do is use the miracles, like the lightning and the water. But you have the same layout with your city, the difference being you have palisades, and you'll get these from your workshops, or I think your farms too, sometimes too. And you can use these as blocks. There's also like a special palisade that kind of attracts that you get later in the game. But for now, I just have the regular palisades. I put down my blockhouse in the top north part there as a wall, and then I'm putting my hero character up to the top part. This isn't overtly complicated or difficult either. Like, you can lose all of these missions, and then there's a checkpoint. You just restart with where you were left off. So here I'm zooming in on Philotas. He's melee, but there aren't any flying units, of course, because he's the only guy I got right now. And you see the spawn points too. It's not the monster spawns where they come in. They have these random purple swirly clouds that pop up on the map, and then they'll come from there. So you're deciding, okay, where are my palisade walls? I plopped one down there, so I saw that one. You're deciding where they go, and then if you want to split up your character heroes if they're attacking from a couple directions, or how many they're attacking with. And this one early on, I thought it was pretty lame, honestly, even in the second world too. But by the third world, for whatever reason, I remember that in the original, everything seemed to come together. Then you start to really dig into the simulation aspect of Actraiser Renaissance. But that's pretty much it for the game. You get the gist of it. After you play the first world, like how the rest is going to be, using your character, getting the next one, like they'll do some extra things, like you'll use different miracles, or like you'll have a mini boss character during the settlement sieges. But it's predictable how the story is going to progress. The interest is the different worlds that they use, like the desert one, or the one by a lake, and I won't spoil the rest. And but aside from that, too, the third character you meet is obviously going to be involved in the story. These aspects are predictable, but like how it plays out, the dialogue, the stories, like that's where they mix it up, and that's going to determine if this is a game that you want to be buying. So, is it worth it, and who is it for? If you are a fan of the original, like a die-hard fan, it depends what you liked about that game. If it was its brevity of being very short and just kind of running through it, looking for additions to the action segments, or even the city building, where like that was kind of more of an in-depth strategy sort of a game, then this is a pass. It's not going to be worth it. You're going to be annoyed by how long each region is, and then the action sequences basically being the same thing, along with the additions of having to destroy all the spawns now that don't really matter. Then you can be kind of put off of it. But if you were generally interested in the original, like the city building, kind of like how I was, then you're going to like this one too, because there's much more with that. You get more connected to each region, at least I did, because there is a lot more dialogue, and you're doing these sieges where you're just spending more time looking at the town. That creates kind of a bit of a more connection. I think you remember the theological themes more, which was the point of the original game. And then the presentation, all that is out, obviously going to be a lot better. If you are playing this for the first time, the draw of the game isn't the side-scrolling action sequences, but it's not too heavy-handed where there's too much of it that's going to make you not want to play this game. It'll just come off as something a bit dated. But you can go through these pretty quickly, whether you choose easy or normal, especially even hard difficulty. You could kind of grind through, because they're not all that long to really play. So if you're interested in the simulation part of it, though, the stories in each of the regions and the city building part, and looking for it being a bit more relaxed and not involved where you can really make these serious mistakes that you kind of have to start your game over, or you have to change your approach, change your strategy. You don't really have that kind of a stuff. The most that you have is with your forts or gatehouses. If you put them in the wrong spot, like the enemy ends up spawning in a specific area, then I got to move these around. You can do that, like at no cost. You can upgrade your forts, you can move them around, no problem. You can change the type that you have. Even if you have resource problems, you can just sit around and wait, and you'll eventually collect what you need. It's more laid back. It's more about the experience of seeing in a linear way, seeing your region, city, town, whatever, build up over time, and then enjoying the stories along, just having that along the way. But you're going one region after another. Like, you're not really mixing it up so much, because you need enough experience to get to the next one. I pretty much did one after another. I was able to do a little bit towards the end with I think the 4th and the 5th and the 6th, but I still defeated the bosses pretty much in order. I think just the 5th one maybe I did earlier than the 4th, something like that. But just because you need that experience, you level up God to the next one to get to the next region. And the last one was fun too. That gives enough content for it being $30. If you're not interested in the simulation, though, just the action, or looking for more in-depth strategy, then this is going to be a pass. It's on all platforms except like the Xbox One consoles, even on iOS and Android. It's $20 there, $30 on the rest. So like this would be a kind of a fun one to do really on mobile devices as well. But if you did like this video, please give a like. If you really liked it, consider subscribing. Give a nice gentle tap to that bell. And I will. See you next time. Beep, beep, boop, beep, boop.